So let's get started. Shelley Page is a veteran journalist in Ottawa who's won 3 national newspaper awards, 3 Canadian Science Writing Awards, and a top prize for investigative journalism. She's also written a parenting book and edited 3 others. Shelley recently completed her Master's of Journalism, investigating how mainstream media dismisses disability within newsrooms. In our October-November issue, Shelley wrote Broadview's 195th anniversary cover story, an incredible piece of journalism that she poured many, many hours into researching and writing. Please join me in welcoming Shelley Page.
Good evening, everyone. I'm extremely happy to be here, both to discuss my article and also consider the legacy and the future of Broadview. When the team at Broadview reached out to me to ask me to do this story, I was super excited, accepted the assignment, and then I realized that I had agreed to write about almost 200 years of history in a few thousand words. I was like, what have I done? And as it turns out, it was not easy. I knew it was going to be difficult when almost everyone I interviewed for this piece told me, I'm glad I don't have to tackle this assignment. That said, I became immediately intrigued with the assignment. First of all, why did the Broadview team want me to do a piece on the 195th anniversary of its founding? Why not wait till the 200th? And then I quickly learned that the next 5 years in this publication's history will be pivotal. With fewer people in the pews, religious publications fighting to stay alive, like many magazines out there, there's a lot at stake. And in assigning this story, I think that the Broadview editorial team provocatively thought, let's take stock of our legacy now, remind people of our value and uniqueness of what is being built decade by decade, century by century, and why it's important to guard against it in any way diminishing. I was really excited to dig in. It took so many books, PhD theses, interviews, et cetera. And through this, I learned that the editors and publishers who've helmed this publication throughout history have always struggled against the odds to launch it, reimagine it, and keep it going. And just as they have challenged prevailing establishments, they've always created important conversations among its readers. I also think when I accepted the assignment, I didn't know that the founding editor was Egerton Ryerson. And at first I went, holy smokes, how am I going to handle this? This seems controversial right off the bat. He's such a controversial figure today, and he was when he founded this magazine. Mind you, back then, as I say in my story, he was a 20-something saddlebag preacher. He defied his father, who had been an Anglican, to become a Methodist. And then as an apprentice preacher, he would travel the Yonge Street Circus, riding horseback, visiting far-flung settlers, either converting them or drawing them into Methodism. But at the same time, he was also writing essays in defense of Methodism, as well as against the holds the Church of England had on Upper Canada. He took on the family compact with, his pen. He was writing essays everywhere. And then he became elected to found the Christian Guardian. It was not easy. And I think every, editor who subsequently had something to do with this magazine struggled to figure out how in the world to build a base, be controversial, be interesting, but also bring important church news and church goings on to its readers. At the beginning, he even used his own money to keep the publication going, and he would lick the envelopes and mail out the copies himself. He also really wanted to challenge the way things were in Upper Canada. Which was atypical for religious publications at that time. As York University professor Scott McLaren, an expert in Christian Guardian, told me that Ryerson had a democratic impulse, and he believed in waging a newspaper war to change people's minds because he thought their opinions mattered. Under Ryerson's tenure, the number of ministers and the church members almost tripled. Obviously not just because of the Christian Guardian, but he certainly created a focal point where church members could get their news and debate the issues of the day. What I learned in my research was no matter the edition, the century, or the reigning editor, a reader of this publication would be exposed to stories of consequence, like the evolution of Canada, intermixed with reports of church decisions, religious instruction, and theological perspectives. As I pointed out, as I found out and pointed out in my article, a reader in 1837 would get the latest news on the Upper Canada Rebellion, or during the two world wars, a strong defense of pacifism. And then in the 60s and 70s, after it had been named the United Church Observer, readers would read editor Al Forrest's passionate criticism of the state of Israel for its actions against Palestinians. Editor Forrest's views put him at odds with much of the Canadian establishment, as we found, but his ongoing reporters swayed many in the United Church to the Palestinian cause. And I'm hoping that, Jim Taylor, who is presenting later, who worked closely with Al Forrest, might speak a bit more about that. This challenging of the establishment has continued throughout the magazine's history. That's what makes it so valuable and interesting. Whether it's welcoming gay ministers, apologizing to Indigenous survivors of residential schools, or climate justice. The editors have always asked hard questions about who and what Canada and Canadians, should be and care about. Which brings us kind of to its present day history. And I think while most editors who came before Jocelyn Bell, who, spoke at the start of this meeting, could go out and find, like I said, stomp through the trenches looking for important stories. She, the magazine very much has her stamp on it for the issue she cares about. But in this modern time, she's also focusing on running a multimedia media organization that includes this magazine, a website, podcasts, videos, e-newsletters, and then virtual events like the one we're having this tonight. As a journalist and now a reader, I'm in awe of this evolution. I think of the United Church Observer that my grandmother read and always had in her house in Lethbridge, Alberta, and I just can't believe how much it has evolved in just a few decades. Doing this article made me believe passionately in what Broadview is doing, and also I wonder how it will fare as it looks toward its 200th anniversary. And I hope my article has sort of helped raise some of those questions, but also has really showed how important that Broadview has been to just critical conversations that this country has had. And, I think what I'd like to say is that I do hope that this very old and very storied publication continues to be embraced by both old and new readers as it continues to thrive and guide these critical conversations. And I also think after writing about the 195th anniversary, if anyone needs a piece on the 200th anniversary, I haven't, I'm here to write it. So anyway, that's kind of just how I, look at things. I might be available for the 200th years, because I have no doubt you'll be around to, celebrate.
Thank you so much, Shelley. And you got the job, sure. When we get to 5 years from now, we'll even assign it to you early so you can start to tack it on and track us as we come along.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that overview of your piece, and thank you for the kind things that you said about me. I think that our group is going to have some great questions for you. So I just want to pause and invite people to ask questions. And, Jim, Trisha, our other guests, feel free. You can jump in too with questions if you'd like. Okay, I'll just jump in to start. Can you give people a sense of, how much time did you put into this? How many people did you interview? What goes into a piece of this? You gave us a little bit of an idea and how much reading you did. Can you give us an overview of just the amount of work that goes into a piece of journalism of this scope?
Well, the first thing I did, and I was pretty lucky because I got to talk to Jim Taylor, who's on the call, and he was the editor of the magazine when it celebrated its pre 150th, I think, if anyone can believe this, Jim. And so, first of all, I read the magazine that he put out because it was filled with a lot of really valuable information. So that was my first stop. I also did track down Jim in the West Coast or in BC and talk to him for a while. But the other thing I did was I just started um, trying to find source material on religious publications. And the religious publications, the earlier ones, were actually crucial to the advancement of democracy across the United States in particular. And so that really frames thinking about the Christian Guardian and subsequently the Observer and Broadview in a different way, right? Because you realize that, um, you know, Ryerson he did see that it was key to a democracy, even if he didn't use those words. And I think Methodists were responsible in a way for sort of bringing the free press across North America. That makes it pretty exciting. I didn't get into, the length I had, I didn't get into that, but I, feel I should hold up all of the books I read just so I could be confident in that case. Anyway, so, and I think I interviewed about 15 people, which, anyway, I think there's other questions too.
We've got one from Marty and Doug Tyndall. Marty's one of our board members, and they ask, when you talk about Ryerson as a renegade Anglican, I'm reminded how much of our history was influenced by faith and how little we're taught about that in school. Was any of this surprising to you?
Well, I mean, to be honest, so much of this was surprising to me. And I have, like I said, my grandmother always had the United Church Observer on her coffee table. And I also knew it as a respected publication because I went to journalism school and people I knew went on to write for it. But back to what we're taught in history, I think two things that are just extremely fascinating are the fact that Methodists are considered responsible for the development of the free press in North America. And I also think what's really interesting is Ryerson took it further than they did in the United States. In the United States, they sort of stuck to their knitting, so to speak, and it was really focused on religious news. Mm-hmm. The paper that he founded, he wanted to be part of the political conversations in Upper Canada. And that was part of his mandate because he didn't believe that Upper Canada would be served if it had the Church of England as its official church. And so much of his writing and discussions were basically fighting that and trying to get all of the denominations and various churches, Protestant churches, treated equally. So yes, Marty and Doug, like I'm surprised about it, but I can't even, say I can speak authoritatively about what is taught in the education system right now, but I'm pretty sure it's not this history. So yeah.
Fair enough. Bob Betson is asking if you spoke with Muriel Duncan, who was the editor when he worked as a reporter. And actually, Muriel was the editor when I first began freelancing for the United Church Observer.
I had any back and forth email exchange with Muriel, and that's as far as it went. I sort of explained what I wanted to know and why, but we never did, for various reasons, connect in that way. And to be honest, when I was trying to figure out how to fit all of this history into what would end up being about 6,500 words, I did come up with the structure that seemed, and this is too much inside how you work a piece like this, but I realized that if I could focus on three key editors in chief throughout history, I would have to shortchange some history, but it was a way to sort of highlight the importance that editors have had in this publication, and also fit it within, and let's face it, 6,500 words is very long in magazines today. So I want to stress that. But so I did have an exchange with Muriel, but it wasn't beyond that.
Yeah, and I think that was a great way. You can't detail every editorship along the way, so you have to zoom in on a few select people.
Yeah, and I did feel really bad about that. I just have to say, like it was.
There's a lot of tears on the cutting room floor, I'm sure. Things you had to give up to fit it, and we could have given you 1,200 words, I'm sure, or 12,000. A question: do you think the change to Broadview has encouraged the inclusiveness that we are seeking?
Well, I think that's probably, for Trisha perhaps to, speak to. But what I do think is that they are tackling constantly issues that aren't getting the important treatment they need in mainstream media. Mainstream media is really suffering. They don't do an in-depth job of almost anything anymore. And when you're talking about ethical living, justice, spirituality, which I think are key to all of our lives, I think this is probably the only, you know, place you can go right now in the country where you can get that discussion. I just think more people probably need to know about it. And that's, I think, a big challenge.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a crowded landscape. That's something I'm curious about too, because you have worked in mainstream media. You've worked in lots of different newsrooms. What are the similarities and what people are facing and the differences that you found with in your in-depth study of our work and our history?
Well, I think, you know what, when you're purpose driven, and by purpose, I mean believing that like you have a pretty tight mandate and mission. And I think that's what is so special. And it also, in a way, is something that propels you forward because you have this rich history, but you also have the mission and purpose. And I think that's something. I mean, obviously, you're driven like everybody by economic concerns, but you also aren't driven just by pleasing your advertisers. I mean, I guess we can talk a bit about your relationship with the United Church, not me, but I just sort of think you have the same limitations. But I just think you benefit from having a purpose and a mandate. That I know that's not answering your question, but I can just say as a long time, print journalist, um, I don't know, like if you have a kind of a spirit and a belief behind you that you're doing something for the greater good, I just think it really infuses the product that you're creating. And I think that's what makes it special.
Thank you. I'm glad that comes through because I also believe that. So I'm really glad to hear you say that. I think this will probably be our last question that we have time for before we move over to Jim. But David Lee is wondering what will be the most important issues for Broadview going forward, both from a religious viewpoint in Canada and more broadly.
Okay, I think that I am not, David, thank you very much for your question, but I don't think I'm equipped to answer that. I just think uh, that is probably something that I don't want to say I'm speaking out of turn, but I even think, Jim with all of his writings, or even Trisha or Jocelyn could probably tackle that question much better than me. So maybe put a pin in it and ask it a bit
Yeah, let's put
later.
a pin in it. Let's put a pin in it and we'll come
Yeah.
back to it later. Okay. All right. Any other questions from anybody? We have another minute. Oh, we've got one. Carolyn. Oh, that's a direct message to me. Um, I'll respond to that one after. Sorry. Okay, so we are going to thank you so much, Shelley. That was amazing,
Okay, thank
and
you.
thank you for your work on that piece. That this is going to be a keepsake. People will be reading it. When we hit our 200 years, when we hit our 250, they're going to go back to this piece, and it's going to stand as a real testament to where we are today and where we've come from. So thank you so much for
Thank you
your
so
work.
much. Thank you. Thank you.
So, Jim Taylor has been a writer and editor for more than 60 years in books, magazines, and broadcasting. For 13 of those years, he was managing editor of the United Church Observer, followed by 15 years as editor of the ecumenical clergy journal PMC, Practice of Ministry in Canada. He is the author of 17 books and has ghostwritten 6 more. In 1981, he co founded Woodlake Books, which became Canada's largest independent religious publishing house, for whom he edited over 100 books. His articles have appeared in publications as diverse as the Toronto Star, Reader's Digest, Imperial Oil Review, and the Christian Century. At 88 years of age, he still writes 2 columns a week, sent to an international mailing list. Jim, we welcome you.
Thank you. It's always, I'm tempted to say, oh gosh, thanks very much, but that's too much. I was trying to think about why I was invited to this, and I think I can safely say that I'm the oldest living survivor of the glory days of the Observer, when we had a circulation of 330,000. We were the fourth largest publication, fourth largest magazine in all of Canada, way ahead of a lot of the US imports that came in. And I'm also probably the last survivor of Ryerson Press, because I was actually employed by Ryerson Press for my first 2 years at the Observer. Ryerson Press used to be a gigantic publishing house, one of the premier publishers in Canada. Then they went down in 1970, and the Observer, which had been an independent publication of Ryerson Press, Jocelyn, kind of like Broadview is today, got sucked into the United Church ethos, the whole system. And suddenly we found that we were church employees, not press employees. That was I'm looking back, and some others of you can recall this, that 1970 till 1980, 1985, somewhere in there, was a huge abyss in church publications. The Observer was about the only thing that kept going all through that time. Otherwise, people were having to depend on imports for Sunday school, for church programs coming in from the States. I think that I hope you don't want me to talk just about what Al Forrest was like, because I want to talk about what the Observer was like. I think it's the key to its success was that it was a congregational publication. Al Forrest used to say that he had come in from a pastoral ministry, and he was still a pastoral ministry. The difference was that he now had 300,000 members to deal with instead of only maybe 300. But that was his underlying purpose. And among other things, to promote the Observer, he would send staff out to every presbytery in the country, which was, I think, in those days, about 97 presbyteries. Every 3 years, people went out to talk to people in local congregations. We gathered together and ate rubber chicken dinners, usually. But sometimes they said to us, you're the only person from the national headquarters who's ever come to see us. He had that strong sense that we were a congregation, we were a publication serving congregations. Now, Al got into all kinds of controversial situations because he went overseas. He went over to Israel to write a book about the New Testament. And then he went to see the Palestinian camps that had been evacuated up on the Golan Heights. And he was there early enough in that process that when he was walking down the main street, he could still see the newspapers that people had been reading when they were evacuated, blowing down the streets. He took the Palestinian side very strongly. It affected the church. I don't think it affected church membership. I sometimes joke that church membership used to be somewhere over 1 million members, and as soon as I joined the Observer, it began dropping. That I can't claim all the credit for that. But it was clearly a focus on, even though we took controversial positions, and Al was a fairly conservative person. I think you said that, didn't you, Shelley?
Yes.
Yeah. I didn't realize how conservative he was until we got into some other controversies, and especially around abortion, the woman's right to make a decision on her own with her doctor's help. And the church endorsed this, and Al fought it for about 5 or 6 years, not turning the magazine over to his particular fights, but just recognizing that his articles all took a slant against abortion rather than in favor of. Have I just about run out of time, Jocelyn?
Well, I don't think you've run out of great memories to share, but if we want to shake it up and see, there's a comment here from Mary Margaret. I wonder, Mary Margaret, if you just want to unmute yourself and just share what you wanted to share here, rather than have me read it out for you.
Hi.
I think Mary Margaret is
Oh,
a
she's here.
subscriber of mine for my weekly columns. So
Yes.
Yes, I certainly am. I certainly am. I don't know. Do you want me to just say what I've written?
Yeah, just you've made a nice note here. You can share that with us.
Sure. Okay. So I did not grow up in the church at all, any church. And I became a United Church person and actually became a United Church minister. And Jim Taylor has been a big influence on me. And I like the writing. I like the basics of it. And I always use, when I do a psalm, I always use an excerpt from Everyday Psalms. And then I give credit because I actually approached Jim about that, and he said, as long as you give me credit, it's okay. That was putting it up on the screen because I have the book. But it was like I would always say James Taylor, and then I would say not the singer. And I get a bit of a laugh in the congregation. And then I would say, I'm so glad that you still understand that I don't, that I haven't gone, but someday that's not going to mean anything to you. But I have used that reference so many times, and I didn't print this, but I just want to tell you that my favorite, or one of my favorites, is the 23rd Psalm in Everyday Psalms. And I have used it. I've used it in conjunction with traditional 23rd Psalm readings. And I have had people who you would expect who would never, ever want any kind of paraphrase of the 23rd Psalm, who are in their 70s or 80s and come to me and said, I like this, and this is what I want at my end of life service. So I think that's a great accolade for you. I so appreciate your writing, and it meant a lot to me, especially not growing up in the church. So I'll close there.
Jim?
Well, thank you. And I saw somebody came up and said, is there a way of linking to these Psalms? The best way is probably just to send an email to me, rewrite, which is what I usually do. It was supposed to be called editing, but I usually rewrote. So it's rewrite at shaw.ca, and I will add you to the mailing list, and you'll get my columns. I've got about 1,000 subscribers, which I'm really quite impressed with. I mean, I'd love to have 300,000, but I don't know what I'd do with them.
That's really good. That's a good number. Any other questions? There's a compliment here about how great you look. I was saying the same thing when we got on just before the Zoom. You're living well, obviously. I have a question. I mean, we interviewed you. We think of you as being part of the Al Forrest years, but these are the Jim Taylor years too. And so I wonder if you have memories of any difficult editorial decisions you had to make, or any just tough calls that you had to make when you were at the Observer.
I learned a lot. I mean, I came in as a freelance writer, not as an editor. I'd been working in broadcasting before. Editing and broadcasting is more like editing music, because you have to include the pauses and the rests and all those kinds of things. One of the great joys of editing into print was that I didn't have to include people's ums and ers and ahs and those misstatements. Doug Tyndall, I see you laughing because, people start a sentence and halfway through they change their minds. And what do you do with it at that point? Well, in print, I just edited out the stuff that they didn't intend to say. And it looked absolutely fine. And nobody knew that I'd taken out chunks. Where was I going?
I was wondering if there was, some poignant moments from your time there that, decisions you had to make or tough stories that you tackled, things like that.
The toughest stuff came after Al Forrest died. He found that he was getting up early in the morning, and his doctor told him, don't try to go back to sleep. If you get up at 4 o'clock, go sit and read or do something like that. That's your circadian rhythm taking place for you. And on a morning in December, just before Christmas, he got up and went to sit in his favorite chair in his living room. He was reading Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and his heart stopped. I got a phone call about 10 o'clock in the morning, his son-in-law just saying, sorry to inform you that Al Forrest has died. And I was told that I came out of my office and everybody said, Jim, what's happened? You're as white as a sheet. We spent the rest of the day trying to figure out if this was a true statement that he had died, or it was just the kind, oh boy, here I'm getting into a difficult subject. You see, in Al's stance against what the Israeli government was doing to Palestinians, he offended a lot of, I would almost call them militant Zionists. And so, for example, he'd go up for a talk, giving a speech in Barrie, north of Toronto, and his wife and family would know where he was going, and he'd probably phone them to say, okay, I'm on my way home now. And about 20 minutes later, they'd get a phone call saying, this is the Ontario Provincial Police. We're sorry to inform you that your husband was killed in a car accident on Highway 400. And so when we got this message that Al had died, there was that instant suspicion that this was more of that propaganda reaction that was coming along. We did sort it out. We did find out it was true. And then that opened the whole door of how do you write about a guy who has shaped the church for, I think it was 23 years. What do you say about him? How do you deal with his shortcomings as well as his strengths? And we put in, Pat Clark, Muriel Duncan, and I were the ones who were doing most of the work on this. And we put in long hours talking about the possibilities. And we made a mistake. We should have put him on the cover of the Observer, and we didn't. We put a pig farmer on. And I've never forgiven myself for that. It was, we thought we were being professional and carrying on, and we should have acknowledged that not only we were in grief, but the church was in grief, and we should have acknowledged that.
I appreciate your vulnerability and sharing that. And, you were quoted in Shelley's piece saying that that Al was like a father to you. So in addition to trying to figure out how to present him publicly, you were also grieving a dear mentor.
Very much.
Yeah.
I was also involved in a lot of church associations. Al had formed originally a group called Interchurch Features, which was, I'm trying to remember all of the US denominations that were involved, but they were all the big ones, the Lutherans, the Presbyterians, the Episcopalian Church, Roman Catholic, Disciples of Christ, oh, United Methodists. There was even an evangelical organization that had joined in here. And also there was Canadian Church Press. And at one point after I was president of Canadian Church Press, and after I had stick handled as chair or president, I had stick handled our way through a certain difficulty with the whole group. Al took me aside afterwards and said, "You'd make a good minister. If you want to go through and study ordination, I'll pay your tuition for 3 years."
Wow.
That was the kind of father he was. And I didn't take him up on it because I wanted to do something more than a sermon a week.
You want to keep writing 2 columns a week until you're 88 and beyond, so that's great. Jim, there are a few lovely comments in the chat for you, but at this time we're going to move on to talk to Trisha. But Jim, it's just been so wonderful to hear your memories and to make that time period in the life of this magazine alive for us again. I just really cherish you and want to thank you for being here tonight and for sharing your thoughts in the article as well with Shelley.
And I'm really okay if we stick with Jim. I don't know what I can say after that, honestly. I should just go home, Jim. Wait, I am home.
No, there will be some time after, we don't cut everybody off right at 8 o'clock. And so if people want to linger afterwards and chat with Jim and Shelley and Trisha some more, we'll be there. So to introduce Trisha is Broadview's very first executive director. She guides Broadview's strategic planning process, circulation, fundraising, and customer service. Her spiritual call is to help people make a difference in the world through generosity. Tonight, Trisha is going to give you a sneak peek into Broadview's future with a short discussion about our strategic plans. So I'll turn it over to you, Trisha.
Yeah, thanks, Jocelyn. So I wrote my first story for The Observer 22 and a half years ago. And it really feels like this media organization is part of my DNA as much as the church is. But I'm just this blip in this extraordinary history, as I've heard tonight, and it's humbling to think about that. You know, it hasn't really been until the last couple of years that I've gained an appreciation for how important our presence is in our country and beyond. I was aware that people appreciated the journalism that we offered. I knew it had an impact on people's lives because I would have readers contact me, but I really didn't put all the pieces together until really recently, until the last couple of years. Like, for example, the internship program that offers paid internships, which are rare anymore. And that our interns have gone on to work at the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star, where they tell us that they're more apt to cover religion because they've spent time with us. The importance of that for religious journalism in our country kind of just flew over my head. The welcoming of underrepresented and diverse voices and diverse contributors, artists, designers, writers. I didn't appreciate how unique that is. I really didn't put it together that we're the only media organization in the country to cover progressive Christian news and views, and how unique that curious and open-minded perspective is. I just took it for granted. I would read Broadview. And The Observer before that, I would run and read it cover to cover. And these are the kinds of thoughts that would run through my mind. Well, I agree with that. Or I don't agree with that. Or that's kind of interesting. Or, I never really thought about it that way before. Or, ooh, that letter to the editor really touches a nerve. But I never thought things like, oh, You know, if this story is marketed well, it could really move the needle on this issue. Or, oh, you know, I haven't thought about this before. And maybe there are lots and lots of people, thousands in fact, who are just like me and haven't thought about it either. And what difference does it make if we all do? And wow, a lot of this is created by underrepresented voices and talent. And that's so rare. So, you know, my thoughts were really about me and my response to what was in my hands, and not the wider significance of that, not about its place, not really about its potential. So I've had this 22-year relationship with this media organization, and I feel that I'm now beginning to understand its place and value in the world. You know, fewer and fewer media outlets cover religion. I'm personally am concerned about growing polarization, division, the quality and tenor of discourse. And we have this tremendous legacy and this perfect platform on which to make a difference at this time. I strongly believe that we can and that we have an essential role to play. At the heart of everything that we do is journalism, storytelling. And for more than 2 centuries, Broadview and its predecessors have been a trusted source of thoughtful and inspiring journalism. And obviously, we're proud of that legacy. And we know that we are called to do more in this time. And so moving forward, we're embracing new ways to share stories that matter, that inform and inspire and bring people together. We are planning to focus on solutions journalism. We aren't just interested in covering the problems of the world, but also the work that people are doing to solve these issues. And we want to be part of helping build awareness of ways forward. Another really key part of our new strategic plan is intentionally facilitating, fostering dialogue. We want to lift the stories off the page and off the screen, and to help foster meaningful conversations that build unity. And so, for example, for providing materials that accompany key features to help small groups have discussions, holding webinars on particular themes. We want to grow our voice. Print remains vital. And we also know that to have a wider impact, we need to expand in the digital spaces. So from podcasts to webinars to testing platforms like Substack, we're excited to reach people where they are on the platforms that they're using. Why? Because we want to make sure our stories of spirituality and justice reach as many people as possible. And we can't do that alone. So collaboration going forward will be essential. We're eager to work with other organizations that share our values. So imagine, for example, if we could collaborate on coverage of important issues with American publications, or develop cross-continental projects, or team up with advocacy organizations and other denominations working on and covering the same issues. Imagine the impact then. If I could sum up the future direction in a few words, it would be solutions focus, inspiring dialogue, expanding our digital presence, and collaboration. You know, we've always, and I think Shelley mentioned it, we've always had a purpose. We've done journalism for a reason. It's not just about the product that we sell. It's about a vision that we are trying to realize, a vision of a more just and compassionate world. So our readers and our supporters, our donors, our reading club attendees are on this journey with us, creating it with us. And over the coming years, we are going to together transform platforms and borders and ecumenical lines to build on that legacy we've heard about tonight that's carried us through nearly 200 years. So thank you for your support, your belief in the work that we do together, and your commitment to a spiritually grounded and ethical and just world. I'm open to questions.
Thank you so much, Trisha. It was a great overview and summary of where we're heading. You've got some questions coming up from Carolyn Pogue. Trisha, who are the other publications Broadview might collaborate with?
Yeah, well, we haven't started putting out feelers yet, but certainly we have a number on our list that we will be approaching. And honestly, we're open to working with any organizations with like-minded values. So, Jocelyn, maybe you can talk about some of the conversations you've had, since it's more on the editorial side.
Yeah, I mean, we have collaborated in the past, for example, with Christian Courier, just small newspaper. We've collaborated with Reader's Digest in the past. I'm trying to think of others. Anyway, we have done mutual publications at the same time with other things, and it's just it's a matter of being more intentional and building those partnerships. We know lots and lots of people across Christian media and secular media, and there's opportunity. We've collaborated with the Walrus in the past on an event. So there's opportunities. We need to grab them and expand our audience through that. Marty and Doug Tyndall ask, can you say any more about the vision of collaborative journalism? It's an exciting idea. Is that a similar question?
Yeah, you mean solutions journalism? Is that the solutions journalism, looking at not just the issues in the world, but all the folks that are trying to solve it, right? Jocelyn, we've just done some solutions journalism training for our staff to help us move in that direction. Jocelyn, do you want to say any more about that? Again, it's on the editorial side.
Yeah, we're going to tag team the answers here, I think.
She's got her expertise and I have mine, so I rope her in on the editorial.
I'm going to just run on the assumption that you meant solutions journalism, Doug and Marty. So yeah, we've done training workshops on this in the past. We've just had a great refresher workshop. And the idea is that, if you only share the problems of the world, that one thing that happens is that people tune out. And, we really want people to have the knowledge about what's happening, have the information, have good fact-checked information about what is happening, but also to feel that, we can be part of the solution, and that there are people working on resolutions. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to solve climate change next week. It means there are people working on aspects of problems, and maybe some of that is that what they're trying to do isn't working, and we're going to investigate that too. It's not to put a everything's fine spin on things. It's to look at, when you have an issue, who's working on it, and what kinds of solutions are they finding, or what other communities are doing something similar that we could be importing into this situation and learning from. So that's what that is. It's something that we have been doing, and something that we need to continue to focus on in our work. So okay. So Mary Margaret says grassroots is vital, and how are we attracting communities of faith who are struggling with survival? I brought up an issue that came up at a gathering today that came out of Broadview. It was well received, but people did not know that Broadview had already raised the issue.
It's interesting you bring that up, Mary Margaret, because this week we've been preparing a mailing unlike any other we've done to communities of faith, in part to raise awareness of some of the work that we're doing, and also to invite support. And I'm not talking just about financial support, but support sharing stories, right? Support sharing social posts, support through prayer, all kinds of ways of supporting us. So anybody who's connected with a church will hopefully see that. Hopefully they'll do something with that package that is going out. But certainly, the grassroots, I would agree with you, is vital. And I've been doing a little bit of pounding the pavement around that. So one of the things that we're open to is being invited to, engage, especially virtually, with groups. So send me an email if you'd like me to come and talk to your group. I'd be happy to do that.
Margot says, might you expand on ecumenical lines regarding expanding and including?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think we have a lot to learn from each other. And I think there is a lack of media coverage in other denominations. And so we are having those conversations and exploring that.
Yeah.
And honestly, Jocelyn, I think that we had an Anglican priest or representative at our webinar. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think she's a priest. I think she's a staff person with the Toronto
Okay.
Diocese. But we have a webinar coming up about the bullying of clergy. And one of our speakers is from the Anglican Diocese of Toronto, and she's an expert in congregational health. And so that's a way that we can work ecumenically. We can present content and bring Anglicans who are interested in our content into our sphere. We also know that the Presbyterian Church doesn't have a publication anymore. And the Anglican Journal is there's some things up in the air happening there. If you've been reading the Anglican Journal, you'd find out. So, there's lots of people who would, I think, feel a sense of home with the kind of content that we produce. And, but, we maintain our United Church identity as well.
I agree with you. I'm an Anglican priest, and
Okay.
I am associated with the diocesan publication, although we haven't written for them for a little while. Yeah, I think there would be a market especially among progressive Anglicans.
Yeah.
And I subscribe to it, and I'm sure others do.
Mm-hmm.
I also think sojourners would be in the States would be
Yes.
a good fit.
Yes. Yeah, we've talked about that as well, and just need to come up with a great story that we both want to do. But we've got, I'm part of the Associated Church Press, or we are as Broadview, and the Canadian Christian Communicators Association, which was formerly the Canadian Church Press. And so we've got tons of connections. We just need to work together on different projects. For those who don't know, Bob Beckman is a former editor of The Observer, former staff member. So it's great to see you here, Bob.
It would be exciting to be able to work on a project, an editorial project, with sojourners, and really collaborate together on and deliver a product that would be, cross country. It would be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm going to wrap us up because I know that some people need to get going, and so I don't want to leave them hanging with the conversation. But if anybody wants to stay on, I hope our presenters can also stay on for a few minutes afterwards and continue the conversation. There's more great questions coming up that we can discuss. But this brings us to our official end of the 195th anniversary program. Thank you so much to all of you for being here tonight, and especially Shelley, Jim, and Trisha, who volunteered their time to make this event possible. And I am just so grateful to all three of you. Tomorrow we'll be sending you a short survey by email so you can share your thoughts about this event. As we conclude our celebration, I'd like to remind everyone that Broadview is more than just a magazine. It is a charitable organization committed to fostering thoughtful dialogue, inspiring positive change, and shining a light on stories that matter. Our mission is to engage readers in exploring justice, faith, and ethical living, and to do so, we rely on the generous support of people like you. So if you've been moved by this anniversary celebration, please consider making a special donation to Broadview. Your support will help us continue to provide a platform for amazing voices like Shelley's, Jim's, and Trisha's, and to bring meaningful faith-driven content to readers across Canada and beyond. So we're going to stay online for a bit and continue chatting, but if you need to be on your way, thank you again for being here. Be well, and I hope to see you back at our next online reading club, which is Monday, December 2nd at 7 p.m. Eastern, when Emma Prestwich will be our host. And happy Thanksgiving if you need to go. Thank you so much. Um,
Somebody in the chat asked about
that's a-
AI.
yes, that's a great question.
That was, yeah. Yeah, are you going to answer it or am I? We don't know, honestly. That would be the real answer. We don't know. We've been banding around AI around a lot in terms of how it might impact our editorial, our presence in the world online, what that might mean for us. And there's some speculation that AI may make print more relevant, which would be interesting, because it would be a more trusted source of news again. So we're on the edge, and we're learning as we go with AI.
Have you talked to Tay Moss, who's the
Mhm.
with Church X, and he's doing work for the United Church in Toronto?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, our webinar that I mentioned is going to be hosted on ChurchX. So we've been in
Oh,
touch with
right.
them with
Okay.
that. But,
Well, that's great.
yeah. You know, if I have a lot of mixed feelings about AI, but I do see how it can be used as a tool to speed up certain mundane tasks. um, and that can, that can make it easier to get a few things done in the day if you, you know, can use it for a couple of quick things that aren't, your own expression of writing. Of course, I'm not going to use it to write my editorial, but it's if you're trying to just brainstorm a quick list of something, it can be a helpful tool. It can speed things along.
We're talking about reminiscing about the latter part of the glory days. I'm so thankful that I had the opportunity to travel extensively in Canada and also go to Brazil and India, Nepal, and Cuba, and a number of other places for the reporting for the Observer. So it was really an eye opener and just a great life experience.
Hmm. John Ryerson.
Thank you. What a great evening. I have a feeling that this is a old home week kind of crowd. Um, but I will just I want to make just one quick comment and I have a question for you. I worked in the arts all my life, and my mother was born into the United Church in 1925. And always, when I visited her, the Observer, of course, was on the table. And what I came to learn from that was that the parallel between the arts and church were awfully similar. The actual output's a little different, but the issues, the way we look at the world, telling stories to bring us together, all of that. So it opens up a lot of breadth in the way you look at what's possible. My question for you is around when you say you want to go to where people are, and I get the digital side of that. My church is trying to do that also. But I want to go where you are, so I need to get your attention. And you can put out a product and say, I have this product, and try and sell the product. Or you can ask questions to people, and they say, that's my question too. And I think you've been doing that, but maybe you don't position it as a question. But when you do something like a forest walk, people are finding other ways to find spirituality than just going to church. But maybe it needs to be positioned as a question. Are you, because they haven't abandoned Christianity or spiritual activity. They've just found other ways to do it. That's the concept, I guess.
Hmm.
Is that connecting at all?
I think I sort of know what you mean, but
Okay.
that we can ask people questions about how they find spirituality. Is that what you're? And
Yeah,
then
well,
think about how we can.
did you ever wonder why or how it's positioning it to the public as to what's it? So you can say the sermon this week is about Thanksgiving, or you can say what is prayer when you're at the dining room table? So like it's a
Okay.
different way of framing.
Mm-hmm.
And then because what you're doing is you're creating curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Curiosity makes you go further.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
It's John.
No, it's a good point. Who else? I don't need to direct, but Helen, we haven't heard from you.
Thank you, Jocelyn. I've been thinking about everything you've been saying this evening and looking around at the people that are here. We are all very active United Church members in our own way. I had a very interesting conversation with another active United Church member from another city and another province this week that I've been mulling over. And her comment was the church needs to get out of itself. Get into this is not where church is happening in the church. And we explored some of the different organizations that are active in our respective communities. And I'm just thinking now, I didn't think of this at the time, unfortunately, but one very small way is that, and I don't have a question, but I would be looking for responses. One very small initiative is that our small, well, not so small, Broadview Reading Discussion Group in St. Albert, Alberta, has paid for and introduced Broadview to our local library, which is very well known all over Alberta as being the most active Western public library. So anyway, I just put that out to you for your further thought. We need to get out of the church and into the community.
It's a good idea, Helen.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
That's just one little thing.
Yeah, that is a good idea.
That's a great idea.
What a big thing.
Mhm. I like it. Mhm.
Mary Margaret, you had your hand up for a bit.
I did. And so many things come to mind. And I love what you were saying because we made sure that the Observer magazine was going to several of the nursing and retirement homes in the area that I'm in. And the thing is, do people look at it? That was the big thing. So we didn't know. So the thing was that actually a minister would come in and say, hey, did you read this article? And let's talk about it at a little weekly gathering at one of the larger retirement homes in the area. And I thought that was a really good thing to do. And I used to subscribe to the Observer regularly because that was a thing that you did, not because I was United Church, but just because it also helped me because I didn't grow up in the church, as I said before, but it helped broaden my view. And when it became more available online, and that was free, I was actually very thankful when I was approached to support it monthly. So it made sense. I love getting the Observer the Observer articles online, and I can pick up the magazine in the church, and that's good as well, and I can read the full thing. But I don't feel that there's enough emphasis from, and I'm retired, so from ministers to say, hey, did you look at this? Did you see this? Did you see what's happening and what they're saying and what's going on here? And that saddens me a bit about what's happening with the whole magazine and what's there, because it's so important what's there. I was at a breakfast gathering today and I brought up something that came out of the Observer, and it was like, hey, yeah, that's happening in my space and my gathering, or my pre-retirement community right now. And it was awesome. But I worry about things fading.
Hmm.
Mhm. Thank you.
One initiative we've taken is we have a very generous donor who is funding subscriptions to theological colleges in Canada. And so, trying to make that, when people are becoming ministers, make that part of their, make it part of their sphere, give them a copy so they get used to seeing it. And, again, there's always these small things and they add up. It's not one thing. It's a lot of small efforts and a
True,
lot of,
true.
building
And
up.
it's the time, or not the timing, but sort of the phase of things, or how things are influencing different times in people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's important as well. I just personally think that we've gone from certainly in my generation, I'm 73, where magazines and books and that kind of influence was very important.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I certainly transitioned into other things, some don't. And it's really important that we gather those people up and say, we're still here. And this is how we can influence you, or this is how we can still be part of your life. I think that's really important, because I think, like I said before, in the other thing, I did not grow up in the church. And through different circumstances, I ended up becoming a United Church minister. And then it was like, all these things are there for us. And Broadview magazine and Observer before was part of that. It was like part of the influences that I grabbed and used and was influenced by. And um it's I don't want to say it, well, it won't go downhill, because there are people like me, I think, who will still support that, but there are others who just say, oh no, I don't read it anymore, or whatever. And I want to get that enthusiasm back again.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate the efforts that you're putting into it. I think we need to wrap up for tonight. I don't know if Trisha, if you had any other things to add, or if
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean,
go ahead.
I'm interested in your response. I mean, I've glossed over tonight some of the strategic plan. We're sending out letters actually to everybody with links to the strategic plan online. The overview, it's a few pages long, but it's more in depth than what I shared tonight. I'd be interested in the reading club's feedback for that. I think that you all received roundtable invitations to conversations around the strategic plan. So we welcome feedback, because as we move forward with the plan, it's going to be ever evolving. We're never finished, right? And it really needs to be our shared plan. And so, we're inviting as much feedback as we can from various groups, this being one of them. I'd really encourage you to attend if you can. And anytime you can flip us an email, we'd be happy to read your perspective on what we've shared, or your ideas about ways forward. I've heard some of them tonight, and just really appreciate that feedback.
Yep.
That's awesome to hear that, Trisha. Thank you.
Right.
Yep. Okay, well, thank you. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and hope you get lots of good food and good weather and some time out in the leaves. And just really appreciate everybody's time, and happy anniversary to all of us. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Night.